You mentioned the NASDAQ 100 approaching a crucial point, one that could signal a major shift. What does that actually mean for everyday investors like me?
So it's all about these technical indicators, these signals analysts use to kind of gauge market sentiment. In this case, the NASDAQ breaking below a certain level could trigger a move away from U.S. stocks.
So people pulling their money out.
Exactly. Investors might start looking for safer havens, which could have ripple effects throughout the entire market. It's a potential turning point, and what happens next could really set the tone.
So it's less about the actual number and more about what it represents, like a shift in investor confidence.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so if investors are pulling back from U.S. stocks, where are they putting their money instead? I'm seeing some pretty wild headlines about Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is definitely having a moment.
It's above $99,000.
Yeah, which is a 45% surge since Trump's election win. There are a few theories about this. Some investors might see Bitcoin as a hedge against traditional markets, especially with all the uncertainty right now. Others might be betting that Trump's policies could somehow benefit crypto.
Interesting.
It's still a volatile asset, so it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out.
It's like some people are embracing the chaos while others are running for the hills. But it's not all about Bitcoin, right? I'm seeing some less than stellar news coming out of China, especially in their tech sector.
Yeah, Chinese stocks are facing some headwinds right now. Disappointing tech earnings are playing a role, but there's also growing anxiety about what Trump's return will mean for U.S.-China relations.
Bringing back those trade war memories.
Exactly, and we're even seeing foreign investors pulling out of Chinese government bonds.
Wow, that's not a good sign.
It's definitely a sign of waning confidence.
It feels like that trade war tension is simmering just below the surface, ready to erupt at any moment. It makes you wonder how these political events are going to shape the global economic landscape moving forward.
It's a big question mark.
It really is. But let's shift gears for a second and zoom in on some company-level developments.
Yeah.
Especially in the tech world. What's caught your eye lately?
Well, Apple is reportedly developing a much more advanced version of Siri.
Oh, yeah. What's different?
We're talking conversational AI, like actually being able to have a back-and-forth dialogue, almost like talking to a real person.
Hold on. So Siri's going from robotic assistant to, like, a chatty friend. What are the implications of that?
Well, imagine the possibilities. From scheduling to recommendations, this could really change how we interact with technology. It also raises some questions about the role of AI.
Yeah, the ethical consideration.
Exactly.
That's a whole other can of worms. Okay, but Apple isn't the only one pushing the envelope. I'm hearing whispers about OpenAI, the folks behind ChatGPT, potentially launching their own web browser.
That's right. It seems like they're looking to challenge Google directly.
Wow, brave move. Think they can pull it off.
Well, Google is a behemoth.
It's David and Goliath.
It really is. Whether they can actually pull it off, that's a different question. But it's a bold move for sure.
It is. But speaking of Google, it seems they're facing some challenges of their own. The Department of Justice is pushing for them to sell off Google Chrome.
Yeah, the DOJ is calling it an antitrust concern. They believe Google's dominance in the browser market is stifling competition and potentially hurting consumers.
That's a big deal, considering Chrome is the most popular browser out there.
If the DOJ succeeds, it could reshape the entire tech landscape.
Sounds like the days of unchecked big tech dominance might be numbered. And Google's not the only one feeling the heat. The European Union is likely to investigate Amazon, right?
Yeah, for potential breaches of the Digital Markets Act.
So regulators are really cracking down.
They're taking a closer look at these tech giants, that's for sure. There's a growing concern that they've become too powerful and that their practices might be anti-competitive.
It's definitely a new chapter for big tech. But hey, even with all this uncertainty and change, there are still some bright spots. I'm seeing that Gap is actually raising their sales targets.
Because of strong holiday demand.
That's right.
It's a good reminder that certain sectors can be surprisingly resilient, even in turbulent times. Gap's success also shows how important it is to understand each sector's nuances.
How they respond to different economic conditions.
Exactly.
So even with all the market jitters and tech shakeups, there are still pockets of opportunity out there. It's kind of reassuring, actually. But let's be real, the global economy is still on a bit of a roller coaster ride. What's the latest on that front?
Well, the Eurozone is flashing some warning signs. Recent economic indicators point towards weak growth ahead, with trade risks and political uncertainty adding to the pressure.
So not exactly what Europe wanted to hear.
Not really, and it sounds like things could get even tougher, with ECB officials calling for reforms and rejecting any new EU debt.
After Trump's election.
Yeah. They're essentially saying, European countries need to fix their finances before asking for more help.
It's a tough stance.
It is, but it reflects a growing concern about financial responsibility within the Eurozone.
It'll be interesting to see how individual countries respond, especially those already facing economic challenges. And speaking of challenges, Germany's growth has been revised downwards, and there's talk of a winter recession there. Across the channel, the UK isn't doing much better. They're experiencing their first contraction in company output since 2023. What's the main driver behind this downturn?
Well, the UK is facing its own unique set of challenges. Brexit is still casting a long shadow, and the global economic slowdown is hitting them hard.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Retail sales have slumped, businesses are struggling with rising costs, and consumer demand is weakening. It's a complex situation with no easy solutions.
It paints a rather bleak picture. But wait, isn't consumer confidence in the UK actually rising? And Japan is experiencing slowing inflation while their services sector is showing signs of life. How do we make sense of these mixed signals?
It's a classic case of different indicators telling different stories. While some aspects of these economies are struggling, others are showing resilience. It reminds us that economic data is rarely black and white.
We need to look at the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom, but it definitely feels like we're navigating some choppy economic waters. And of course, we can't forget about the political chessboard. Things are heating up there too, especially with Trump back in the game.
You're telling me he's already started assembling his administration, and some of his choices are raising eyebrows. Take Pam Bondi as Attorney General, for example.
Oh yeah, that's a controversial pick for sure.
It's one that will likely ruffle some feathers. And it seems like the Senate might not be so quick to rubber stamp all of Trump's nominations this time.
They're going to push back.
There's a feeling that they're ready to, which could create some fireworks down the line.
That will be interesting to watch.
The power dynamics between the White House and Congress are always fascinating, especially in situations like this.
Absolutely. And then there's the geopolitical arena, which is always full of surprises. I'm intrigued by these reports that China is signaling openness to trade talks with the Trump administration. I thought things were pretty strained after the trade war.
It seems like both sides recognize the importance of finding some common ground, at least when it comes to trade, but that doesn't mean all the tension will just disappear.
Right.
The situation with Ukraine and North Korea's entry into the war is a stark reminder of the geopolitical complexities we're dealing with.
Yeah, and then you've got the U.S. slapping new sanctions on Russia's Gazprom bank. So much for easing tensions there.
It's a delicate dance, this whole diplomacy thing.
It really is, especially when you have major powers with competing interests.
Trying to predict the next move is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded.
And speaking of navigating tricky situations, let's not forget about those central banks. They're the ones trying to steer the ship through all this economic turbulence. What are they up to these days? Are they raising rates, cutting them, or just standing by watching the world burn?
Well, the ECB seems to be taking a more nuanced approach this time around. They're focusing on the trajectory of monetary policy rather than the size of any potential rate cuts. They're trying to send a clear signal without making any rash moves.
So careful messaging is key. What about the other central banks? Any bold predictions?
Well, there's speculation that the Bank of Japan might actually hike rates in December.
Really?
The weakening yen and Trump's return are putting pressure on them to act.
Wow, that would be a surprise. A rate hike from the Bank of Japan.
And then in New Zealand, economists are predicting another rate cut by the Reserve Bank. They're acknowledging that their economy is facing headwinds.
And they're willing to step in and provide support. So we've got a mixed bag of approaches.
Just like with everything else we've talked about today.
It's a pattern. The global economy is a complex web of interconnected forces. It's never a simple story.
Never is.
But that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
is-
It's been quite the ride so far, and it doesn't look like things are slowing down anytime soon. We've covered a lot of ground, so let's take a moment to digest everything before we dive into what this all means for the future.
Sounds good to me. It really is amazing how all these seemingly separate things like those market swings and the political dramas and the tech innovations are actually all connected.
It's like they're all part of this giant, messy dance. Everyone's stepping on each other's toes and just trying not to fall over. But if we try to look at the bigger picture here, what are the main themes that are emerging from all this?
Well, one thing that really stands out is volatility.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether it's the stock market, geopolitics, or the global economy, there's a sense that things are unpredictable, like the rules have changed.